In this video, I'm going to show you a few simple ways that anyone can improve their home studio recordings just like this. Whenever I started recording music at home, there were a few really bad habits that I picked up on that I want to help you guys avoid, so let's go ahead and get right into the list. The first thing that we need to talk about is your guitar tracking. If you're tracking guitars that are just slightly out of tune, then chances are maybe you won't notice in the context of the full mix, but I promise after you listen to the song enough, eventually you will notice that something sounds really off, and I guarantee it's your out of tune guitars. So tune your guitars more than you think you need to. Not only do your guitars need to be in tune, but they also need to be in time. There is a pretty big chance that if you're recording guitars by yourself in your home studio, then maybe you're not being objective enough with your guitar takes, and maybe you're not recording those guitars in time well enough. Slightly out of time guitars are really good for the whole stereo width of the overall mix. However, if they are too out of time, then it will take away from the overall impact of the song, and you just really don't want that. So from what I understand, it is pretty uncommon in the home studio world for people to sit down and track an entire guitar part for a whole song. So if you're like me and you're punching in different parts of the song, say from the intro into the verse, a pro tip to make your guitar track sound much more natural and make the song sound better overall is to play a little bit of the next part past the part that you're currently recording. So for example, if you're recording an intro riff, then you need to go ahead and play a little bit into verse 1 as well. Stop the recording, trim back, and then punch in on verse 1. Since you played a little bit into verse 1, there will be less abrupt of a start and stop to verse 1 riff. So it'll sound more like you're playing it just all the way through rather than stopping and punching in. And it just makes it sound way better. And my last tip for really great guitar tracks is not even a tracking tip, but it's an editing tip. You need to learn how to edit guitar as well. For example, if I have a breakdown where the transient of the guitar waveform is really obvious and it seems that the left, right guitar and bass guitar are out of time with one another, then in an instance like that, it's really simple to just cut the waveform and move it to where it needs to be, and it just adds to the overall impact of the song. Professional audio engineers are not recording out of tune or out of time guitars, and you probably shouldn't do that in your home studio either. So this next one goes along with guitars, and it's going to be a quick one. Bass. Let's touch on bass for a second. You would be surprised how often people do not record bass at all. So the first tip is going to be to just buy a decent bass. You can just buy a Squier Jazz bass. I have a Squier P bass here, and just actually record bass for your songs. So for the first several years I was recording music, I didn't own a bass, and so just all the demos I was making, I never tracked bass to go along with the guitars. And for some reason I was wondering why my songs sounded so like empty and small. But bass is oftentimes the thing that holds the mix together. It is what gives a lot of just beefiness to the song, and it just makes it all sound more cohesive. So if you're lacking that bass, then chances are your mix is going to sound pretty empty and maybe even kind of separated in a weird way. And plus, a really good bass tone also adds to the guitar tone. So if you're wondering why your guitars don't sound quite as mean as like Adam Nolly Get Good or like Will Putney's, that's because you don't have a bass tone backing it up. So a really good bass tone is absolutely essential for a great sounding mix. And the final thing that I want to touch on in this video is drums. And a lot of what I'm going to say about drums I've already said on my channel multiple times. So if you're enjoying this video, maybe hit the subscribe button and check out some of the other videos on my channel. A lot of it is very similar to this, and it all revolves around home studio recording and guitar content. Go check it out. For some reason, for a lot of us home studio guys, drums are a bit of an afterthought. And I kind of think it's probably because a lot of us are originally guitar players who became songwriters who want to be able to record our own stuff. But we just never really taught ourselves how to think like a drummer. Like me personally, back in the day, I would write a drum part that had the snare on 2 and 4 and a drum part that had the snare on 3, and just depending on how I wanted the song to sound at that particular moment in the song, I would copy and paste either the 2 and 4 or the 3 on that section of the song and just call it quits. And obviously what this led to was just really repetitive sounding drums and just an overall less interesting song. So if you're not programming interesting drum parts, then just expect it to be a detriment to the whole song. So for like me personally, whenever I'm writing or recording a song and I know that the song I'm writing sounds similar to something another band has done, then maybe I'll go take a listen to some of their stuff and get some inspiration from their drummer. So maybe give that a try if you have a hard time coming up with your own drum parts. You also want your drums to sound less like they're being played by a computer, and the best way to do that is to vary the velocities in your drum programming. Whenever I first started recording guitars and programming drums in my home studio, everything was always all the way red, 127 velocity for every drum beat, and that's just not how a drummer plays. There is variation in things like drum fills and the way they hit the cymbals. So for example, cymbal and like a snare roll, you wouldn't have all of them to be the same velocity. You would have some harder than others, and maybe it would get stronger as the roll goes on, just depending on what you think the drummer would do in that instance. Or like in your cymbals, there's a natural sway to how a drummer hits the cymbals. So he'll hit some harder, and then maybe the very next one will be softer and then harder again, and so that creates a natural sway. So whenever I'm programming something like cymbals, I will usually vary that 5 to 7 velocity points, whatever that scale is. Adam Nolly Get Good, who owns Get Good Drums, has actually said in the past that the velocities that he believes an actual drummer hits within most of the time are more like 100 to 110, and like 127 is really just not even a realistic sound at all anyways, so stay away from that whenever you're programming your drums. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, please do consider hitting that like button and the subscribe button, and maybe I will see you guys in the next video.